And thank you all for this opportunity to introduce Mike Copps. It's a real honor and a privilege, and I'm also grateful for the opportunity to do something other than talk about community broadband. I'm not going to talk about the basic background and occupational facts. You can find those on the F2C website, and I'm not going to enumerate Mike's many accomplishments, because if I did that, there wouldn't be any time left for his presentation. So what I'll just do is give a couple of personal observations that I hope will capture his essence. Most of you know him in any event, so it's hardly necessary. When Mike took office at the FCC, I, like many of us, read his opinions, mostly in dissents and concurring opinions, unfortunately, and was certainly impressed that this was a person who spoke to our passions and our needs. But I didn't really get to know him until the mid-2000s, when he and Jonathan Adelstein and I went on mission to create or to push, plead, beg the U.S. to develop a national broadband strategy worthy of this great nation. And we gave each other material and shared our papers and comments and other things. And I saw a side of Michael that was different. It was the background, the human background, that led to those opinions. And three things came out in that period of time. First was a deep, abiding belief that advanced communications technology was the driver, the enabler, the platform, that everything that we would be doing going forward needed to have and to be made available to as many Americans as possible, as rapidly as possible, for as little cost as possible. Second was a great feeling for the term public interest, which Michael pointed out many times was pervasive in the Communications Act, but to him it really meant something. And third was that what it meant to him was deeply rooted in human beings, that the scale of the public interest was individuals and not just corporations or other kinds of institutions and entities. And as time went on, eventually when Mike announced that he was retiring from the Federal Communications Commission, that happened right at about the time that I was reading a biography of Louis Brandeis, and the connection immediately occurred to me, because so much of Michael's best stuff is in dissenting and concurring in opinions, and let's hope that, like Louis Brandeis, the wisdom in those opinions become majority opinions as time goes on. And so now we have perhaps the best of both worlds. In his retirement from the commission, Michael is now available to us for speeches and assistance on various matters. He's now a member of the Board of Governors for Common Cause, and he's a member of the Board of Directors of Public Knowledge. He writes frequently for the Benton Foundation, and he is going around the country riling up human beings and sharing the message at the grassroots level. So we have that, and at the same time, we have in Michael's chair at the FCC, Jessica Rosenworcel, so the tradition will be carried on. I give you Michael Copps.
Good afternoon, all. And thank you, Jim Baller, for your warm and generous and very gracious introduction. When I think back, like you were, to the earliest stages of trying to get a genuine broadband strategy developed for our country, the first name that always pops into my mind is Jim, because I remember so well his visits to my office early on, his conviction that indeed this could be done, even amidst times that were not very encouraging for such things, and his vision for what a viable broadband strategy should contain. So his was truly a pioneering and a formative voice. He has been a champion for broadband, and we owe him, all of us, a tremendous debt of gratitude. And David Eisenberg, what an impressive conference you have put together here. I am honored to be here. So many movers and shakers and so much expertise and so much ground that you're covering. And it's a good thing because that ground just keeps moving and shifting and shaking, and there's a good idea one day, and the next day, or what feels like the next day, it's being sold for billions of dollars. So I'm happy to be here. People always say new and exciting things at this conference. They're constantly coming up with great ideas, so I know I've got my work cut out for me. When I got the invitation, frankly, I felt a little bit like Elizabeth Taylor's sixth husband on his wedding night, as the old joke goes. I know what I'm supposed to do. I just don't know how to make it interesting and exciting for you this afternoon. But there are a lot of interesting and exciting things going on. A fully reconstituted FCC with two obviously very talented new commissioners. Efforts to reform or deform the FCC, depending upon how you look at them. Putting together a regime for incentive auctions to free up much-needed spectrum. Turning universal service reform finally into reality. The courts getting ready to opine on big-ticket items like the open internet and indecency. And amid all this, innovation and technology will continue to transform communications and change our lives and present issues that perhaps we haven't even thought about yet. FCC watchers, of whom I am one now, will have a fascinating time following all of this. And FCC doers, of whom I am not one now, will be as challenged as any group of commissioners has ever been. I think back to how our lives have changed over just the decade that I was at the FCC. Communications just rocketed to the forefront, transforming how we lived every hour of every day of our lives in the digital world. And I think maybe the best description how much they have changed our lives came from my friend Shelley Palmer when he said that we, you and I, are all zeros and ones now. That's who we are, how technology treats us, and often how others see us. That's where we live huge blocks of our lives. So I don't think Shelley was really very far off the mark. Think of what life would be like if any of us in this audience had to go back to the tools of the pre-digital age, having to forage with the Neanderthal communications tools of the 1990s, not to mention the prehistoric tools of the 1980s. How do you think all that quality of life stuff would be working out for us? I don't think very well. We'd be as helpless as little Charlie Copps, who's my 7th grandchild, who was born just last week. We are all digital dependents, and maybe instead of calling this the digital age, we ought to relabel it and call it the age of digital dependence. Yet the old historian in me, and you can emphasize either one of those two words, reminds me that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Try as we might to talk about new issues facing the Commission, the old challenges just keep coming back. In fact, they never go away. They may come in different wrappings, with new semantics, new lingo, but they're really not much different. It's still all about protecting that public interest. In telecommunications, that means getting advanced communications out to all of our citizens, no matter who they are, where they live, or the particular circumstances of their individual lives, at comparable services at reasonably comparable prices. From there, Congress made plain the need for consumer protections and competition among providers and protecting the safety of the people. And in media, it's still about promoting diversity and localism and competition and making sure people get the news and information they need to be fully functioning citizens. These were the challenges of 1934, 1996, and they remain the challenges of 2012. What's changed, however, is that it's so much more difficult to meet those challenges in 2012. To be sure, it was never a slam dunk, it was never easy, but we have ourselves in a predicament now where we won't overcome these challenges without some pretty drastic changes. And making those changes is piled high with difficulty. Here's my take on why this is so. First, 30-plus years of misguided public policy shortchanged our communications infrastructure. I can speak most familiarly about the years after 2001, because that's when I had a front row seat on it all at the FCC. I came in expecting to shepherd startup and struggling phone companies, some facilities-based, some not yet, to competitive viability. We spent months and years debating unis and switches and leasing local loops and CLECs. We processed Section 271 petitions by the caseload, case by painstaking case, on the premise and the promise that letting the big guys into long distance would be accompanied by opening local markets to competition. In the end, there were some competitive successes, but not enough to justify the claim that there was anything approaching real industry competition. Competition was under attack. No great surprise from the big phone companies, and to me, a bigger surprise from an industry-compliant FCC that was more interested in blessing consolidation than it was in invigorating competition. Now, in 2012, there are those who say, nice try, to those of us who pushed to realize the competitive goals of the 1996 statute, but it didn't work. Get real. Get real with the new world and back the hell off is the message we hear. Well, I don't believe that the statute permits throwing in the towel like that, and I hope our new commissioners won't either. I am not here today to say we can turn the clock back to the days of yesteryear, but I am here to say that the Commission still has an obligation to promote competition, and that we have, in fact, numerous opportunities to give innovators and competitors a fair shot to challenge incumbents for the benefit of consumers. There is a lot more to be done before anyone throws in that nice try towel. Better spectrum policies can reduce barriers to entry and incent competition. Unlicensed spectrum, database-driven spectrum access, smart radio technologies, the list goes on, are all tools that can further competition. Clear requirements and enforcement on data roaming are important. Another tool crying out for action should be action on special access. More access at lower prices would fuel significant telecom growth. The potential of special access reform for backhaul and for competitive wireless and for local governments and for colleges and universities and small businesses, I think is tremendous. But special access as it is presently constituted is a multi-billion-dollar disincentive to competition and, in my judgment, a serious drag on the deployment of badly needed telecommunications infrastructure. On another front, we should be looking at how other countries are deploying broadband and the policies they use to make it happen. We were quick to dismiss facility sharing, just one example. But if we can't figure out how to incent competition through other means, then revisiting this option might yet be necessary if hugely expensive communications infrastructure is going to work to the advantage of all parties, particularly that of consumers. So I think it should be on the table, near the table, and ready for action if we can't jumpstart competition through some of these other avenues that I've mentioned. And of course, vigorous antitrust enforcement is always critical to competition. Antitrust has not been the strong suit of many recent administrations, as you know as well as I. but Department of Justice and FCC action on the proposed AT&T T-Mobile transaction showed life where some had thought the oxygen was gone. Now, with the proposed Verizon cable deal, another canary is sent into the coal mine to see if any oxygen is still there. And why this deal should be so much more difficult than AT&T T-Mobile is not easy for me to understand. No matter what you call it, cabal, cartel, collusion, conspiracy, and restraint of trade, I don't see how anyone can claim that reducing competition in both wireless and wireline somehow advances the well-being of American consumers. Some will say we should just recognize telecom as a natural monopoly, be done with it. I think about 3/4 of those people would also advocate wiping away anything that looks like government oversight or that dreaded word regulation. The other 1/4 would accept the monopoly but advocate imposing the oversight needed to protect consumers. Good luck to them in the current Washington environment. So far, this may sound a lot like Washington speak and regulatory arcana, but it really goes, I think, to the core of where our challenges are. We mostly agree by now, I think, that broadband is indeed the front and center infrastructure of the 21st century. It is dynamic and opportunity creating to an extent greater than any of the nation's numerous earlier infrastructure build-outs. It is part of the resolution of almost every big problem that the United States of America faces, whether it's creating jobs or making America more competitive in the global marketplace, or providing better health care, decreasing our energy dependence, stopping environmental degradation, improving education, helping our children and grandchildren, opening the doors of opportunity for all. Every one of those problems has a broadband component as an important part of its resolution. But let's remember that earlier generations had to respond to infrastructure challenges too. Turnpikes and roads, bridges, harbors, canals, railways, highways, electricity, not to mention plain old telephone service. Those were all infrastructure build-outs. Each one of them was a huge challenge in its own time, and each one of them helped jumpstart the economy. Each one of them created thousands of jobs. Each one contributed to making our people more productive and our country more competitive. And a brief aside that I hope you will permit a former commissioner who no longer feels constrained to limit his presentations to just communications. It is to me reprehensible that we have let so much of that earlier infrastructure decay and rot. Visitors from overseas often cannot believe what they see when they come to the United States of America. Second-rate roads, collapsing bridges, dysfunctional transportation, ancient utilities, the investments that powered us to prosperity and to first among all the nations standing, going to seed. Unattended and underinvested, our infrastructure underperforms. That means America underperforms, and we all suffer. It's not just a bumpy ride down a shoddy road. It's a stalled economy producing too few jobs. And if we can't maintain the basic infrastructure bequeathed to us by earlier generations, then you tell me on what we're supposed to build 21st century American prosperity. That helps. Well, putting aside my aside and going back to broadband, here's where we have to both build and maintain, and let's hope we do a better job here. When I arrived at the Commission's famed portals in 2001, the United States was in the vanguard when it came to broadband penetration. It wasn't surprising. The internet was invented here, got its start here. Fast forward 11 years, and we're number 12 or 15 or 20 in the world. Some would quibble about which ranking is correct. None of them is anywhere close to where your country and mine is supposed to be, so why quibble how far behind we are? And I don't say that because I want to be able to pin a ribbon on our chest and brag about our #1 status. I say it because we are not coming back, and America is not coming back unless and until we get this infrastructure thing right. The reigning wisdom in 2001 was, don't worry, be happy, the market takes care of all things. That premise has always been a mystery to me, because I never really quite got how business would go out and build broadband where there was no business case for it to do so. Why should we expect it to do that? That wasn't how those roads and bridges and canals and railroads and highways generally got built. Why would broadband infrastructure be any different? Those earlier infrastructures were generally built with significant private sector, public sector partnering. Private sector innovation and enterprise fueling the engines of construction, but guided always by a public policy vision of where the country needed to go, along with some incentives to help get it there. Public-private partnering. But the dispensers of the reigning 2001 wisdom, even though they saw themselves as defenders of the American way, they went instead with a curious hands-off marketology that ignored the American past and at the same time short-circuited the future. For 8 frustrating years, more than that really, while other nations built their broadband infrastructures, the Commission busied itself with all kinds of legal legerdemain, reclassifying services, deregulating, and blessing almost every industry consolidation proposal that came our way, and there were a lot of them. We took our eyes off the prize, we forgot the lessons of the past, and America paid a price that it never should have been asked to pay. Both the public and the private sectors failed us, and I would say in pretty much that order. I've already mentioned the public sector shortfall. On the business side, one of the things that stays the same always is the driving thrust of business to grow and to consolidate and to control markets. And believing that doesn't require you to buy into some good guy versus bad guy theory of history. It's part of the energy of capitalism and a force that inheres in that very system. Entrepreneurs take risks to grow, and the economic gains can produce great social progress. But the corollary is that society takes risks by encouraging business to grow. And unchecked industry concentration can cancel out many of the benefits, so that a principal obligation of sound government is to retain some semblance of balance so that the system is serving the needs of all of us. And right now that balance is not there, and we're not even close. It's been upended first by the undisciplined power of money in our politics, and secondly by the inability of the public sector to exercise anything approaching adequate legislative or regulatory oversight. The influence of money has always been a problem for our politics, and so it will always be. But as someone who is still fascinated by the study of history, I cannot think of another era in the annals of our past, including that notorious Gilded Age of the late 19th century, where such huge and usually undisclosed piles of money have so eviscerated our public dialogue and stopped needed reforms in their tracks. Public disclosure would help, but only real limitations on the money itself can ever solve this problem. And I'm not talking about couriers delivering envelopes of cash to the powers that be, although sometimes it seems to come pretty close to that. But I am talking about a political climate in Washington and the state houses where money wields outrageously excessive power and where access, if it's not being consciously denied, is the end result of a system where money always seems to have the inside track. And I'm talking about a business climate so dramatically changed from what it used to be that stockholders trump stakeholders way too much of the time. Workers and local communities have a right to expect more, but the truth is they have lost standing and clout in this unforgiving multinational corporate age. When investments are decided on the basis of how the next quarterly report will play on Wall Street rather than how they will benefit the company's totality of stakeholders, including you and me, we ask for trouble. Now, very often, trouble is exactly what we get. In the broadband age, the power of unregulated marketology and the disinclination of government to do much about it lead to what I think is really an unprecedented irony, a historical irony. We have available to us the most open and dynamic and opportunity-creating technology ever devised, but its wings are clipped. Less and less are 1,000 points of innovation and invention controlling our technology future, while more and more the models of consolidation and bottleneck control are threatening it. This is not to deny the many good things happening out there, but it is to note that the system we have is making it harder for those good things to deliver their full potential. The struggle for an open internet is a new chapter of a very old story. It's the story of gatekeepers and toll collectors who have always been there when new technologies or businesses come along. And again, that's something we should expect. But it's also something we need to protect against. To put our heads in the sand on this one would have serious long-term consequences. For most of my decade at the FCC, we at least knew who the gatekeepers were. But as I noted a few years ago, the gatekeepers of the future may not be the same gatekeepers we had in the past. I believe there is significant action the Commission can take under current authority to protect against the harms of broadband bottlenecking. But I also believe that we are long overdue for a deeper and more serious national dialogue about how to ensure that the internet itself doesn't go down the same road that so many of our earlier communications industries traveled. Oh, it's not a problem, some will say, it'll all work out. People seem to have a hard time identifying what the problem is. Yet a week seldom goes by when there isn't a dispute about openness or privacy or pricing or the perils of search or you name it, the list goes on. We've already had numerous complaints and specific cases with regard to threats to the open internet. And we know by the nature of business enterprise itself that the quest for control is always going to be there. Again, why would broadband and the internet be any different? By now, it should be clear to all with eyes to see that this is an issue that deserves a better public dialogue than it has been receiving thus far. And the first thing we ought to resolve is that when we have that debate, we won't allow it to be hijacked by those whose only argument thus far has been to say it's all about regulating the internet. It's about freedom from bottlenecks and making sure that when the business imperative of control raises its head, we have already seen to it that consumer and competitive safeguards are in place. We cannot wait to do something until the power has grown beyond our ability to rein it in. We know the wages, or we should know the wages of that sin already. So how much better off we'll be if we have some guidance and rules of the road already in place. By now, some of you are probably thinking, wow, 20 minutes into his speech and he hasn't gotten into media yet. The good news is I have only a few minutes left to talk, but you know what the bad news is. But actually, my remarks lead inevitably, I think, to media, or as maybe we should more aptly designate it for purposes of this talk, to information infrastructure. When we first started talking seriously about developing a broadband strategy back at the Commission back in 2009, the news and information implications of broadband and the inextricable ties of new media to traditional newspaper, radio, TV, and cable were not immediately apparent to everybody or to most people at the FCC. We made some progress, though, and the National Broadband Plan teed up the issue, but teeing up the issue is one thing, meeting the challenges and overcoming them is quite another. Here's the challenge. Here's the challenge. Making sure that every citizen has the news and information he or she needs in order to make informed decisions. This is the premise or the prerequisite, really, of self-government. It's a democratic, that's small d, democratic imperative that dates back to the Founding Fathers. Different tools and technologies are obviously at play now compared to then, but making sure our information infrastructure keeps us informed is the ongoing imperative. Back in Washington and Jefferson's time, the infrastructure was post offices and postal roads to ensure the circulation of newspapers throughout the growing young country. And they took that challenge seriously. Subsidizing this effort was the largest national expense after defense and employed the majority of people in government. Today's information infrastructure is very different. It is a slowly evolving hybrid of traditional and new media, with most of the news, over 90% of it, by most counts, originating from the newspaper and broadcast TV bureaus. That kernel of news gets puffed and popped a million ways on the internet. But the original reporting, more often than not, is done by a precious and dwindling few. It's not old media versus new media. That's not how to look at it. We have one media environment. It will continue its hybrid nature for many years yet, and we need to consider it as a whole, even while it is constantly changing. The internet is capable of nourishing our civic dialogue and enhancing our town square of democracy, paving it with broadband bricks, so to speak. Exciting innovation and experimentation are going on there every day, pushed by a lot of you, originated by a lot of you in this audience. There are some successful business plans there, but not yet the kind of business plans necessary to sustain journalism on the level that we once knew it in traditional media. Promising, nevertheless. Barriers to entry are low, links are ubiquitous, we can all be participants once online. But let's be candid, the promise of new media, its potential to sustain a viable information infrastructure is nowhere close to being realized. This should be at the top of your list of concerns as citizens. What we have now is a paucity of facts amid an avalanche of shouted opinion, a shortfall of substance amid buckets of fluff, important stories not just untold, but undiscovered, investigative journalism hanging by a life thread, denied the resources needed to hold the powerful accountable, thousands of reporters walking the streets in search of a job rather than walking the beats in search of a story. Glitzy infotainment masquerading as news, homogenized music and culture stomping out regional and local artists, diversity groups depicted in caricature when they are not being completely ignored. Part of the reason we have all these issues I have broached this afternoon is that we are fast losing our reputation as a news-literate people. If there's one great need we have right now, it is to become, again, a news-literate society, understanding and engaged in the substance of public issues and armed with the facts to make good decisions. Without a media that can dig for facts and cover the beats and separate hard facts from bloviated opinions, our chances of mastering the many deeply disturbing challenges we face right now are dismal. These are really tough problems that we confront right now. They go to the heart of reinvigorating our economy, our global competitiveness, ensuring good livelihoods, creating opportunity for our kids and grandkids. There is no guaranteed happy ending here in this story. There is no guaranteed happy ending. There aren't even great odds unless we begin to understand the mountains America has to climb to redeem its still great promise. So to me, getting our infrastructure right is step number one to getting our democracy right. And my greatest regret after 10 years at the Commission is that we are not further along on the road to getting this done. For those of you who have asked me what I'm going to be doing in my post-FCC life, I have no intention of letting these issues go. They are going to determine what our future is, what our nation will become. I continue to hope the Commission, which is doing such good work on so many fronts, will at long last step up to these issues, especially the media aspect of it, which has been festering for more than 30 years now. My aim is to help it along, no longer from the inside out, but this time from the outside in, at the grassroots level where people live, and where an increasing number of them, and I see them wherever I go, have a sense that something is amiss, that they're being shortchanged when most of their political information comes from super PAC negative ads rather than from some real stories and facts, and they wonder what happened to their local news bureaus and their local music and culture. 40 years in Washington, maybe I'm a slow learner, 40 years in Washington show me that some good things can happen from the top down, and that's still true, but very often in our history, the really systemic stuff, stuff that actually enhances democracy and moves us forward, begins at the grassroots. It gathers power, community by community, spreads, sometimes very slowly, but ineluctably, across the land, and finally it gathers onto itself the force not to be denied. And I believe that's what needs to happen on these issues, so out there is where you'll find me. Finally, just a word of congratulations to Jessica and Ajit, now that they're official members of the Federal Communications Commission. I watched your confirmation hearing. I heard Chairman Rockefeller tell you movingly and eloquently how critically important and how daunting your jobs are, how well I remember him telling me that too, and it resonates more powerfully with me today than ever before. These are issues that are going to make us or break us. And I know, Jessica and Ajit, that you'll do your best and that your best will be very good. And I'll be pulling for your success in overcoming these challenges. And who knows, if you really succeed, maybe I can turn out the lights at Motel 6 and come on home. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. We are now mere moments from that open bar, and I will now divulge the secret location. The open bar and appetizers and the whole reception thing is going to be at Jackie's Restaurant, which is at the corner of Sligo and Georgia Avenue. If you have an iPhone, go to Google Maps or Bing Maps and find Jackie's Restaurant. there it is. Okay, never mind. Okay, so there's the map. Jackie, we're up at the top, and Jackie's Restaurant is down at the bottom. Corner of Sligo and Georgia. You go out the front door. You hang a left. You hang another left, that's Georgia Avenue. You walk down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 blocks, and there it is. Take your time. The official start is 5:30, so you can saunter on down, or you can get there a little early and see if they'll give you a drink anyway. And If there are 3 or 4 people who want to stick around and help us break the set down, there's actually a movie in here at 5:30, so we really have to move quickly now. So thank you very much. Let's have some music.
John, really enjoyed your presentation today. I'm Darren Milet. I'm with Adaptrum. Adaptrum. We make white space super Wi-Fi technology. We were just recently approved by the FCC. Working on getting it into chipsets so that